yeah. Please tell me that I can't, that I won't, that I fail, that I'll never make it out, yeah. Please tell me all the bad.
Welcome back, everybody. You are at That Effin' Sports Show. And the reason you're here is because myself and the Adam Hulse of Adam Hulse Sports are going through every team. We're telling you what the record's going to be. We're going to let you know who's going to the playoffs. We're going to maybe let you know who's going to the Super Bowl. That one may be a little more up in the air. I think we got most of this on pretty good lock. The big difference between what we're doing and what a lot of people are doing, and I'm not saying right or wrong, is we are taking these schedules at face value. We're not getting too deep into like fantasy numbers, and we see the schedule, we see the game, we give you the predictions. There's no pre-planning here. We do not have this show already done. You are getting it live as it happens. I've done this for most of the NFL, and today we go into the NFC North. NFC North is kind of fun because you've got teams like Chicago and Detroit, Minnesota. There's things to watch here. I don't know if there's any real legitimate Super Bowl contenders. Watching these teams and watching these games they're usually pretty entertaining at the very least. I mean, what are you kind of excited about for this one, Adam?
Well, what I'm kind of excited about for the NFC North is that Aaron Rodgers is out of it now, right? So it kind of feels wide open this year. That's how I see it. Like, it would not shock me if any of these four teams were to win this division this year. Kind of up in the air, four kind of unproven teams that they can be the new, like, consistent top dog in a wide open division now. So I think that's the big storyline. And you said you're not so sure if there's Super Bowl contenders from this division. The way everybody's talking about the Detroit Lions right now, it's almost like they're already in the Super Bowl.
There is a lot of love going to the Lions. When we get to the Lions episode, I think we'll be able to kind of justify that once we see the numbers.
We shall see. But for a team that has such little success like the Lions over the last uncountable amount of years, right? There's a lot of hype, especially considering they didn't even make the playoffs last year. It's not like they were real close knocking on the door to being Super Bowl contenders. They missed the playoffs. They missed it by one game, so they were close to being a playoff team, but they weren't even that yet.
Well, they didn't even win the division, and they lost their number one running back. It's okay. When we get to Detroit, we'll break all that down. Until then, in the meantime, as we get there, let's go ahead and start in Chicago. Chicago, yeah, they finished the worst. They had the number one pick, which of course they dealt off, understandably so, because they got the quarterback that they feel that they want. Let's be honest, the guy was the number one rushing quarterback in the NFL last year. So much so, he had 1,143 yards, number one rushing quarterback. That was 367 yards more than the next guy, who happened to be Josh Allen. I'm a big The Ohio State fan, so I know what Fields can do on the ground. Through the air, I also know that's his weakness. Breaking the Bears down, they go 3-14. Those 3 wins come against the Niners in week 1, Houston in week 3, and New England in week 7, which is interesting because New England had a pretty decent defense. They got swept by everybody in their division. They lost to everyone in their division. 23rd in points for, 32nd in points against. Fields still comes out as fantasy QB 6, but number 26 in pass yards, number 1 in rush yards. He goes 17 touchdowns on 11 interceptions. Fields has a lot of upside in that ground game, but he's going to have to pick it up through the air.
Second most rushing yards by a quarterback in any season in NFL history. I mean, more than Mike Vick ever had, second only to Lamar Jackson. So it was a historically good rushing season. A lot of that was designed runs. A lot of that, too, was kind of because he had to, right? He was under a lot of pressure, and his receivers were awful. They had arguably the worst group of wide receivers in the NFL last year. They improved big time in that area, especially with that DJ Moore trade. So I'm not saying they have like an elite group of wide receivers now. It's much better than it was, and I just like to see that the Bears, by making that trade for DJ Moore, what it told me is that they're committing to Justin Fields. They said, let's go all in on this guy. Let's get him some help. Let's see what we really have here. Give him a chance and see where it takes us.
As you say that, though, and I don't disagree with you. I agree with you, but here's another fun fact. Number 1 sacked quarterback in the NFL last year was Fields at 55, and the only move they really made at offensive lineman, other than shuffling some people around, is Darnell Wright comes in. They did bring in Foreman. They already had Montgomery RB27 in rush yards, but RB16 in receiving yards. Shows the dunk downs and design short passes to the running back. DJ Moore will open up the field. Is it really enough if you can't give Fields enough time to throw the ball? A lot of those rushes were scrambles that Fields is able to turn into positive yards, so that's something that they have. But sacked 55 times and really no big improvement, no major commitment to addressing that offensive line.
For one, Montgomery's not there anymore. He departed during the offseason. Adding Darnell Wright in the draft, I think that was a smart move, so that does give them some help. They're going to move things around a little bit, like you said. But to me, what's going to be important, pressure is not 100% offensive line. Of course, a bad offensive line is going to get your quarterback pressure. But look what the Bengals did with Joe Burrow, right? A lot of the way they alleviated some of the pressure on Joe Burrow was by play design, was by running the ball a little bit more, by designing some quicker 3-step drop passes and, give him hot reads and stuff like that, screens, things to get the ball out of Fields' hands quicker. That's on the coaching staff to kind of design it that way. And getting a guy in like DJ Moore, who's a great route runner, bringing him in is going to help them do that a little bit.
Of course, the other problem is on the other side of the ball, it's the defense. Defense dead last in points for, 29th in yards allowed, 28th in first downs, 32nd in rushing touchdowns allowed. I mean, just a lot of problems on the other side of the ball. Let's see how it all is going to play out by the end of the season. Game 1, divisional game against Green Bay, against, I guess we'll call it the new look Green Bay Packers. I mean, new to what we're used to seeing anyway. Love gets his first shot at Chicago.
It's a pretty favorable first game for, the Jordan Love era in Green Bay. And, you talked about how bad the Bears defense was last year. It's fair to say that, these aren't, the Bears of the 80s or anything like that. They're definitely going to give up some points. For me, when I look at this matchup here, I think, if Jordan Love is going to be anything, sure, like these are the kind of games that he's probably going to have to play well in. But it being week 1 and it being his first start, Fields coming off of a pretty good year, should be feeling pretty confident. More continuity in Chicago. I'm going to go with the Bears to get the win in week 1.
Everybody jokes around and it became a thing that Aaron Rodgers owned the Bears in Chicago. And that's the thing, is that that's not just Aaron Rodgers. It's the coaching staff. There's a lot of key players that are part of the Green Bay organization that allowed that to happen. And so, yes, it is Love's first start. A lot of reasons to argue that Green Bay can continue the tradition of dominating the Bears at home. I, however, am also on your side. I think Fields is going to be enough to dominate this game and that Chicago will walk away with the win. Just don't be surprised if Green Bay does win this one. Week 2, Chicago goes down to Tampa, enjoys some beach weather. We already said they're going to enjoy a loss at the hands of Baker Mayfield and Tampa. I think defense really was the biggest reason aside from the traveling on that one.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it on the head. Where the game is being played, plus, the defense in Tampa Bay, I think they're going to be able to do enough. Also, I think Tampa's going to try to just run the ball a lot, which has been a big issue for Chicago, as we pointed out at the beginning of the episode. So that's where the edge, I think, goes to the Bucs.
Week 3 at Kansas City. We have to be careful when we talk about Kansas City. In Kansas City, the last division we're going to talk about at the end of this thing, we got to be careful because they are Super Bowl champs. They are so good. It's going to be hard not to give Kansas City every single win. It's Chicago. They're going to Kansas City. I'm sorry. I'm not silly enough to think that Kansas City's going to lose this game or that Chicago's going to win it.
I mean, real simple situation here. As long as the Chiefs aren't looking past this game, they easily win this game.
Sorry, Chicago. Denver comes to Chicago in week 4. We got ourselves a game here. Hopefully revived Denver team comes in under Sean Payton. We know Payton believes in the team. Week 4, hopefully some things are starting to click and starting to come together. Probably still fresh, which is why I say this is probably going to be a fairly decent game, at least on paper.
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting matchup, right? Because for me, if this game was in Denver, I would pretty easily take the Broncos in this one. In Chicago, interesting, a little bit different. Early in the season, I think maybe the Broncos could still be a little bit rusty at this point, like without the full adjustment coming in, but they are still playing Chicago. And I just think that Denver is just the better team when you really look at it position by position and coaching and quarterback and all of that when you really look at it. So I think that Denver is going to do just enough, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Bears win, but I will take the Broncos.
Yeah, I am actually going to go the other way, and it is because it's week 4. It's because there's still rust to knock off, because Denver's still trying to get things to gel. And I just think Chicago has the little bit of advantage there is they already kind of have it going from last year, and then they add in DJ Moore. It's going to be a close one. I think it's going to be a bit sloppy, but I'm going to go ahead and let Fields' feet walk a win at home against Denver. Then they go to the Commanders in week 5. We've already done the Commanders episode. Go back and check it out. There in week 5, you'll see that we give Chicago the win. This is another one that I think Chicago could win, but Washington, they've got a decent defense that is going to be enough to hand Chicago the loss.
Yeah, I mean, I went the other way on this one. I did give the Bears the win in this game because I didn't give Washington very many wins at all. If you go back and listen to that Commanders episode, I think this is going to be a disastrous season for the Commanders. I talked about it on that episode. I wouldn't be surprised if they have the number 1 overall pick next year. I wouldn't be surprised if this is Ron Rivera's last season with the new ownership, with all the changes, with everything going on, with having, in my opinion, the worst starting quarterback in the NFL. Not much for me to like about the Commanders.
And that's good news for Chicago. We both give them the win in week 5. Week 6, another divisional matchup. Minnesota comes to Chicago. You want this to be a good game. We're going to get into Minnesota as we continue through the NFC North. And Minnesota's got their own problems, don't get me wrong. But the one thing that they have that nobody else in the NFL has is Justin Jefferson. He's kind of enough to beat well over half the league on his own. I definitely think he's good enough to beat Chicago regardless of where they play.
Yeah, I mean, he's a mismatch no matter what team you're talking about, with a team that's really bad defensively like the Bears. Sure, Justin Jefferson could go off, but honestly, I think that the Bears are going to take a step forward this year. I also think that the Vikings are going to take a step backward this year as compared to last year. So I actually think that this matchup here is going to be a home-home split situation. So I'm going to give it to the Bears.
Nice. It's nice to see the Bears get some love from the Adam Hulse. Week 7, Las Vegas comes to Chicago. Las Vegas is going to be an interesting team. I'm really kind of excited to talk about their schedule once we get to it. A lot of changes here. I don't want to get too much on Las Vegas. I want to keep the focus on Chicago. But when Las Vegas comes in, I think offenses are going to do pretty well in week 7.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. This could be a higher scoring game. It's definitely, fun for the fantasy players. Las Vegas coming across the country. We talk a lot on these episodes about how it's not just the two teams playing, because when you just look at the two teams, the Raiders probably are a better team than the Bears. But when you play a team and where you play a team matters a lot in the NFL, and it probably matters more than most will give it credit for. That being said, I'm actually going to take the Bears here in a mini upset.
Wow. Yeah. To me, that is a mini upset. Again, I think offense is going to do well, but we talk about those defenses. Again, Chicago dead last against the run last year, rushing touchdowns, and Las Vegas has the number 1 rusher in the NFL as of last year. I'm going to give Las Vegas the win and Chicago the loss. Then you talk about traveling across the country. Week 8, Chicago travels to the Chargers, pretty close to where Las Vegas was. The Chargers are that team that you can't figure out, you can't predict. Even when we do the Chargers episode, thank God most of these games are going to have already been decided because we've already talked about them, because I don't know what you're going to get. We know Eckler's talent, we know Herbert's potential, and we know they seldom live up to it.
That's 100% right. When you just look at the Chargers on paper, position by position, they are definitely one of the most talented teams in the NFL, but they've underperformed if we're being, just straight to the point. 2 years ago, in the last week of the season, they lost that overtime game to the Raiders in their final game, which put the Raiders in the playoffs and took them out of the playoffs. Last year, the Chargers get to the playoffs. They have a massive lead against the Jaguars in that playoff game, and Trevor Lawrence comes back and beats them anyway in one of the most epic comebacks in NFL history. So yeah, Chargers, very weird team to figure out. They should be better than they are. Maybe this is the year that they figure it all out. Who knows what you're going to get with the Chargers, but when the Bears come to town, they are a much better team than the Bears. They get to play them at home. The Bears have the tough travel across the country, so I am going to take the Chargers to get this one done.
Yeah, me too. As Eckler for me against that defense. The defense is going to ruin Chicago's schedule for me. I'll all the way across this thing. And it's what bothers me because I do think the offense is going to be so improved. I think the offense is definitely going to keep them in games this season, but that defense is just going to let them down over and over again. Hopefully the offense can spark something. Honestly, some of these predictions get blown up, but as of right now, I agree that they take the loss in LA. Week 9 just traveled to LA. Now they got to go clear back the other way and go to New Orleans. That alone is enough for me to give Chicago the loss, which we did in our first series across the NFC South. New Orleans gets the win from both of us in week 9 in New Orleans. And then week 10, we actually split. Carolina comes to Chicago in week 10. I gave Chicago the loss. You actually gave Chicago the win against Carolina.
Yeah, and I mean, if you listen to our Carolina Panthers episode, it shouldn't come as too much of a surprise that you gave them a win and I gave them a loss, because after what we predicted the Panthers' records to be, we were very different on how we see that team.
I'm definitely a little more up. And after going back and checking that episode, you're going to want to check it out.
I keep saying it. If you like hot takes, go listen to the Panthers episode.
But that division is just, anyway. All right, week 11, divisional matchups ensue. Chicago goes to Detroit, Another little road stint for Chicago. Interesting because they are on the roads for week 8, 9, 11, and 12. So only one home game from week 8 to week 12. That definitely could affect things. But week 11, it's at Detroit. Detroit, as we said at the top of the show, one of the most hyped teams of the season already. And in Detroit with the divisional matchup, I'm going to give Detroit the win. I'll talk more about why probably during the Detroit episode. But again, at face value, I don't think it's a hard look.
They're the most hyped team in the NFL coming into this season, in my opinion, when I'm just taking like the gauge of the general public. I like what Detroit has done as well. I'm probably not as high on Detroit as most people are, but they're playing the Bears at home in Detroit. I'll give the Lions the win.
Week 12 at Minnesota. I already gave Minnesota the win in Chicago. I have no reason to think otherwise in week 12 other than you're dealing with Kirk Cousins. It doesn't really matter if Minnesota's playing at home or not. I like to do the reverse split, so I'm actually going to give Chicago the win in Minnesota.
Yeah, I mean, that's becoming a trend in like a lot of these episodes. I like a lot of home splits with these divisions. You seem to pick a lot of road splits, which is an interesting twist on it. But however you slice it, we're both picking them to go 1-1.
They get the bye in week 13. I think they're going to need it by week 13, especially out of traveling 4 out of 5 weeks, that 8-12 stint. Week 14 at home against Detroit, coming off the bye. We brought it up many times throughout all these series. The game after the bye usually is pretty good for the team coming off the bye. They're at home against Detroit. They got swept by everybody in the division last year. I have to give them the loss here with much improved Detroit team, even though they're coming off the bye.
I said it earlier in this episode. I say it on a lot of episodes that when and where you play a team matters. And then, coming off of a bye, there's a reason why, so many head coaches have great records coming off of a bye. Getting an extra week prepare is absolutely enormous in an NFL game. A lot of factors pointing to the Bears in this one, so I'm going Bears.
Home splits for Mr. Adam Hulse. I give him the loss. Week 15 at Cleveland. Cleveland hopefully improved, and we think improved enough to beat Chicago with Chicago having to travel.
The home field advantage obviously plays a factor here. I'm a little bit higher on the Browns this year than you are, but I think we both agreed that getting the Bears at home is kind of a game that the Browns will have to win if they're going to be any semblance of competitive this season.
Week 16, they play Arizona. Go back, listen to the Arizona episode, and you already know how I picked this one. And you got a pretty good idea how Adam picked it as well. We gave Chicago the win with Arizona traveling to Chicago. It's going to be cold. Arizona's going to suck, so Arizona's going to lose. Week 17, same story. Atlanta has to come to Chicago. It's going to be cold. Atlanta's going to suck, and Chicago's going to get the win. Anything to add to that, Adam?
No, I mean, you hit it on the head. Those are two teams that are probably going to struggle a lot this year. Late in the year, having to go to brutal Chicago. It's going to be cold as hell. They're not going to want to be there. Those are games that the Bears can definitely win.
Cold being an advantage in week 18, going to to Green Bay. Both these teams, cold weather teams, they know how to play in it. They like to play in it. Chicago at Green Bay, great matchup. Green Bay's at home. In week 1, we both said Green Bay could come into Chicago and win. In week 18, can Chicago go into Green Bay and win?
For me, like, the big question here is this game going to mean something? And if this game means something, which one of the teams or both of the teams is it going to matter for? This could be a tightly contested division with 4 teams that I'm not like super high on going into this year. Also, the NFC, the wild card race is very wide open. The NFC is not like the AFC. The AFC is loaded with these elite teams. The NFC is a little bit top heavy. There's only a couple of teams that are like really good, and then after that there's a lot of teams that can make a case to be in the wild card race. Which one or both of these teams does this game matter for? I'm actually going to go with another mini upset here, and I'm going to take the Bears to sweep the Packers this year, and maybe we'll get a little Justin Fields taking some Aaron Rodgers out, and he'll tell the Packers, I own you.
That would be kind of fun to see. I would love to see Justin Fields go into Green Bay and win this. I would love to have this game mean something. I just don't think either of those things are going to happen, and I give Chicago the loss at Green Bay.
Much improved divisional record for me from Chicago. You said 0-6 last year. I have them at 4-2 this year.
I don't think Chicago is in any danger of going to the Super Bowl, let alone the playoffs. I've got them at 6-11. If I got the count right, you've got them at 9-8. 9-8 respectable. Honestly, a huge turnaround. Even at 6-11, if they can pull that division record off, like you said, that's a win for the Chicago program and move in the right direction.
Look, I might not be as sure as you that 9-8 is definitely not good enough to get into the playoffs in the NFC. As I alluded to it, there's a lot of like mediocre teams in this NFC. Maybe 9-8 is good enough for a wild card. As we go through the rest of this division, who knows where 9-8 is going to stand in this division race of 4 teams trying to, find their identity here.
We're going to find out in just a few episodes. We go through every team, every division. We talked about the drop off between the top and the rest in the NFC. Is 9-8 going to be good enough? Can Chicago even get to 9-8? I don't think so. Adam does. If you want to find out more of what Adam thinks about the NFL season, go to sportskita.com. If you want to just find his stuff in general, go to @AdamHulse on Twitter. You can find everything we put out at That Effin' Show, EFIN Show on Twitter. Just head over to That Effin' Sports Show on YouTube. Catch all these great episodes and more. We're going to keep breaking down the NFC North. Green Bay up next. Make sure you come back and join us. We'll see you there. Take care, everybody.
Can't stop me now.
You don't wanna fuck with me. A slow burn like a disease. Just tell me that I can and I'll show you things that you couldn't believe.